Take the blue pill, and you'll wake up in Cologne as the editor of a provincial newspaper and join a Masonic lodge. Take the red pill, and I will show you how far the permanent revolution goes.
We are in deep shit, and we know it.
Markets have frozen, a serious financial crisis.
But secretly, we don't really believe that it can all fall apart and so on.
Financial assets related to home mortgages have lost value during the housing decline.
Le système néolibéral n'arrive pas à donner aux gens le prix de leur travail.
Somehow it's supposed to be easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
Ich glaube, dass dem Menschen der Wunsch, reich zu werden, gierig zu sein, schon immer eigen ist.
This classical logic of exploitation no longer works.
Marx, il peut nous donner beaucoup d'aide.
At last, Comrade Marx.
Ce n'est pas suffisant, il faut aller au-delà.
Marx's analysis of capitalism still remains with us.
La réalité est dure, et transformer la réalité est encore plus dur. Mais on est dedans, dedans, dedans. Il n'y a pas possibilité d'être dehors.
What we experience as reality always needs an illusion even to function as reality. There is the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's another train approaching you.
Can I have 2 red pills, please?
First of all, we have to consider the fact that this great Greek metaphor, sphera, is still one of the most powerful concepts when it comes to the question of how to redesign a concrete topology of contemporary existence. So we enter into a period where the discourse on spheres is restarting after the breakdown of the first cosmological talk about sphere. So and also this term of infospheres belongs to a broad field of new approaches to spherological thinking. In geography, they talk about the lithosphere. This is the stone world. The stone ring inside they speak about the biosphere that contains living organisms. The term atmosphere has become one of the basic concepts of contemporary concern. In Greek, it simply means the sphaera of mist. Théa de Chardin, when it comes to the humanities, has introduced the concept of noosphere, which is the intellectual envelope that seems to keep living organisms on Earth together. Yuri Lotman, the great Russian semiologist, introduced the term of semiosphere as a new basic concept to the humanities. Régis Debray has made a contribution with four spherological concepts: the graphosphere, the logosphere, the videosphere, and their integration into something that he calls the hypersphere. And in France, they start talking about something what they call jihadosphere, which could be a new approach to the question of Islam.
Well, the easiest way to do this is instead of talking about all seven, because when you talk about all seven, you're talking about all of these interrelations between them. But consider, for example, the relationship between just three of them. You have production system, and the big question always about production is what kind of technology is going to be embedded in the production system. And as the production system evolved, so new technologies had to be invented. The new technologies that came about demanded a complete reorganization of people's mental conceptions of the world. That is, you had to see the world as something that could be scientifically and technologically managed. And I think it's very interesting that in the early years of capitalism, what we would call in societies concerned with industry were always called arts. So industry was considered an art, not a science and a technology. And that had to shift, and people had to say, we can break down production processes and see them scientifically and set up, you know, these new technologies. So, but that meant we had to understand nature in a completely different way. In other words, the natural world couldn't be mysterious anymore. When I'm talking about the evolution of all of these elements together, I'm saying the transition from feudalism to capitalism was not just one of those elements. It was all of them moving together. No, I mean, I'm old enough to remember what it was like living in the 1970s. And if I ask myself, well, what were the dominant technologies? No cell phones, no laptops. Can you imagine living without that? And the mental conceptions were also very, very different, including, of course, political sensibilities. There's much more concern with social solidarities, things of that kind. We've now become much more individualistic. We become individuals on our cells, phones, and with our, you know, on our screen. So all of this has changed, and daily life has changed radically, which is one of the other moments that I talk about. So one of the geniuses of capitalism is to keep all of those 7 elements in perpetual motion.
AI is already all around you. It makes sure discounters are stocked with enough snacks, it serves you up just the right internet ad, and you may have even read a news story written entirely by a machine. Right now, we look at chatbots like Siri and laugh at their primitive simulated emotions, but it's likely that we will have to deal with beings that make it hard to draw the line between real and simulated humanity. Are there any machines in existence that deserve rights? Most likely not yet. But if they come, we are not prepared for it. Our whole human identity is based on the idea of human exceptionalism, that we are special, unique snowflakes entitled to dominate the natural world. Humans have a history of denying that other beings are capable of suffering as they do. In the midst of the scientific revolution, René Descartes argued that animals were mere automata, robots if you will. As such, injuring a rabbit was about as morally repugnant as punching a stuffed animal. And many of the greatest crimes against humanity were justified by their perpetrators on the grounds that the victims were more animal than civilized human. Even more problematic is that we have an economic interest in denying robot rights. If we can coerce a sentient AI, possibly through programmed torture, into doing as we please, the economic potential is unlimited. We've done it before, after all. Violence has been used to force our fellow humans into working, and we've never had trouble coming up with ideological justifications.
One addict of Facebook confided in me, not confided, he actually boasted to me that he made 500 friends in one day. My reply was that I live 86 years, but I don't have 500 friends. I didn't manage to do it. So presumably, when he says friend and I say friend, we don't mean the same thing. It's different kind of friend. I never heard when I was young the concept of network. I heard about human bonds. I heard about communities, this sort of thing. But not network. What is the difference between community and network? Community precedes you. You are born into a community. On the other hand, we have network. What is network? Unlike community, network is made and maintained, kept alive by 2 different activities. One is connecting, and the other is disconnecting. And I think that the attractiveness of the new type of friendship, Facebook type of friendship, I call it, is precisely in that. That it is so easy to disconnect. It is easy to connect, to make friends, but the greatest attraction is the facility of disconnecting.
A rede é tudo, pai. A rede é uma coisa incrível.
When I was a young man, growing up in New York City, I refused to pledge allegiance to the flag. Of course, I was sent to the principal's office, and he asked me, "Why don't you want to pledge allegiance? Everybody does." I said, "Everybody once believed the earth was flat, but that doesn't make it so." I explained that America owed everything it has to other cultures and other nations, and that I would rather pledge allegiance to the earth and everyone on it. Needless to say, it wasn't long before I left school entirely. Then came the crash of 1929, which began what we now call the Great Depression. I found it difficult to understand why millions were out of work, homeless, starving, while all the factories were sitting there. The resources were unchanged. It was then that I realized that the rules of the economic game were inherently invalid. Shortly after came World War II, where various nations took turns systematically destroying each other. I later calculated that all the destruction and wasted resources spent on that war could have easily provided for every human need on the planet. Since that time, I have watched humanity set the stage for its own extinction, and I have watched as the monetary powers control the political structure of supposedly free societies.
Perdone, ¿para la entrevista de trabajo? Gracias. Soy ingeniero industrial con 5 años de experiencia laboral. Tengo 2 másters, un posgrado en gestión internacional y hablo 4 idiomas. Soy muy trabajador. De hecho, no me importa trabajar los fines de semana. Tampoco me importa hacer horas extras gratis cualquier día de la semana. Acepto un sueldo de mierda. Unos 1.000 euros o así. Bueno, quien dice 1.000 dice 600 euros. O 400.
¡Venga, pulsa, pulsa! Que como no le cojáis nos desahucian la casa.
Puedo cobrarlo todo en negro. No hace falta ni darme de alta en la seguridad social. ¿Qué coño? Puedo hacerme hasta falso autónomo. Y quien dice coche de la empresa, dice coche propio. Nunca, nunca en mi vida hago huelga. Paso olímpicamente de mis derechos laborales. Pero si está pienso que los sindicatos no sirven para nada.
Humans have been engineering life for thousands of years. Through selective breeding, we strengthened useful traits in plants and animals. We became very good at this, but never truly understood how it worked, until we discovered the code of life, deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. The means to edit the genome of a human embryo already exist, though the technology is still in its early stages, but it has already been attempted twice. In 2015 and 2016, Chinese scientists experimented with human embryos and were partially successful on their second attempt. They showed the enormous challenges we still face in gene editing embryos, but also that scientists are working on solving them. Regardless of your personal take on genetic engineering, it will affect you. Modified humans could alter the genome of our entire species because their engineered traits will be passed on to their children and could spread over generations, slowly modifying the whole gene pool of humanity. It will start slowly. The first designer babies will not be overly designed. It's most likely that they will be created to eliminate a deadly genetic disease running in a family. As the technology progresses and gets more refined, more and more people may argue that not using genetic modification is unethical because it condemns children to preventable suffering and death and denies them the cure. But as soon as the first engineered kid is born, a door is opened that can't be closed anymore. Early on, vanity traits will mostly be left alone. But as genetic modification becomes more accepted and our knowledge of our genetic code enhances, the temptation will grow. This is a slippery slope. Modified humans could become the new standard. But as engineering becomes more normal and our knowledge improves, we could solve the single biggest mortality risk factor, aging. 2/3 of the 150,000 people who die today will die of age-related causes. Currently, we think aging is caused by the accumulation of damage to our cells, like DNA breaks and the systems responsible for fixing those wearing off over time. But there are also genes that directly affect aging. A combination of genetic engineering and other therapy could stop or slow down aging, maybe even reverse it. Some scientists even think biological aging could be something that eventually just stops being a thing. We would still die at some point, but instead of doing so in hospitals at age 90, we might be able to spend a few thousand years with our loved ones. Research into this is in its infancy. And many scientists are rightly skeptical about the end of aging. The challenges are enormous, and maybe it is unachievable. But it is conceivable that people alive today might be the first to profit from effective anti-aging therapy. All we might need is for someone to convince a smart billionaire to make it their next problem to solve.
Over the government's plan to avoid defaulting on its loans.
Is that the unemployment keeps rising, and it has to keep rising just because we have an excess supply of goods, which is
this is all borrowed money that our
that debt is owned by banks in other countries. It's been over a while.
Including right here at home.
In the form of a convenient personal loan. A filter cigarette that delivers the taste, and 45 malt liquor.
Are you hot?
Quite some time ago, by a section of America is sponsoring I first learned it from my grandmother. Now, my grandmother was a wonderful person. She taught me how to play the game Monopoly. She understood that the name of the game is to acquire. She would accumulate everything she could, and eventually she became the master of the board. And then she would always say the same thing to me. She'd look at me and she'd say, "One day, you'll learn to play the game." One summer, I played Monopoly almost every day, all day long. And that summer, I learned to play the game. I came to understand the only way to win is to make a total commitment to acquisition. I came to understand that money and possessions, that's the way that you keep score. And by the end of that summer, I was more ruthless than my grandmother. I was ready to bend the rules if I had to win that game. And I sat down with her to play that fall. I took everything she had. I watched her give her last dollar and quit in utter defeat. And then she had one more thing to teach me. Then she said, "Now it all goes back in the box." All those houses and hotels, all the railroads and utility companies, all that property and all that wonderful money, Now it all goes back in the box. None of it was really yours. You got all heated up about it for a while. But it was around a long time before you sat down at the board. And it will be here after you're gone. Players come and players go. Houses and cars, titles and clothes, even your body. Because the fact is that everything I clutch and consume and hoard is going to go back in the box, and I'm going to lose it all. You have to ask yourself, when you finally get the ultimate promotion, when you've made the ultimate purchase, when you buy the ultimate home, when you have stored up financial security and climbed the ladder of success to the highest rung you can possibly climb it, and the thrill wears off, and it will wear off, then what? How far do you have to walk down that road before you see where it leads? Surely you understand, it'll never be enough. So you have to ask yourself the question, what matters?
Ти ме мрави към намирато на чинеса и на чинеса съм нещастна тук моя циганочка, моя смугляночка, моя лукавочка, любимая моя, люблю я песенку, люблю циганочку и не забуду твои черные глаза, когда он в табору тихонько подъезжает и ничего, колеска заскрипит, мои сердечко тихо замирает, ночью ты ширишь, песенка звучит, моя циганочка, моя смугляночка, моя лукавочка, любимая моя, люблю я песенку, люблю циганочку и не забуду твои черные глаза. Когда пела, не терпеть, как не поете. Гитару слышь, я чавала под во сне. Со мной умеренно, сердце мне льется. Мою я песенку по этому туре нет. Моя цыганочка, моя смугляночка, моя лукавочка, любимая моя. Люблю я песенку, люблю цыганочку, и не забуду твои черные глаза. Ай, ритая, ай, чавала, но мамика сью. Ай, ритая, 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 ай, ритая, ритая, ритая.
The world can't deal with a static economy. It can deal with a zero-growth economy, and that's why I distinguish between development, human development, and growth. I mean, we develop as human beings, and we develop our capacities and powers in all sorts of ways, but it doesn't take necessarily growth in the capitalist sense to do that. There's a famous, well, for me anyway, a wonderful statement by a philosopher called Alfred North Whitehead about nature. And he says, well, nature is about the perpetual pursuit of novelty. And I think that's an interesting idea. And we're part of nature, and I think we are about the perpetual pursuit of novelty. So when I say zero growth, I don't mean nothing changes. In fact, I mean human development can go in all sorts of wondrous directions culturally, in terms of, you know, poetry or song or whatever, you know, all kinds of things of that sort seem to me to be possible, without necessarily saying the only way you can do that is to have 3% compound growth forever. I think we have to separate growth from human development. And if you say to me, do you think the world is ready for a society where there is no transformation in human nature? The answer is no. And I think that was one of the big failures of past experiments with communism, that there was not the liberty to pursue novelty. Well, we've got to construct a society which is capable of you know, pursuing novelty and doing all kinds of interesting things, and engaging in conflict too, you know. But without necessarily being committed to this 3% growth forever. That seems, if you like it, I know it sounds all utopian, but if you said, is that the heart and the core of my utopian vision, my answer would be yes, that's what it is. That's what we should end up with. Zero growth, immense flowering of human capacities and powers.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Ah!